Find the mean and standard deviation of this probability distribution. Then use the range rule of thumb to find the maximum and minimum usual values. So to start out, we know how to find the mean given the formula. So that is, the mean is simply each of the values for our random variable times the probability that our random variable takes on that value, added together. So 1 times 0.3 plus 2 times 0.5, lastly plus 3 times 0.1. So plug that into your calculator and make sure that you get the same thing that I get, 1.6. Next, we'll find the standard deviation. So this is all going to be under a square root. And to find the standard deviation, we have two formulas. I'm going to go with the one that's easier for me to calculate, but you can use either one. So that is, I'm going to take each of the values of my random variable, square it, and then multiply it times the probability the random variable takes on that value. So that'll be 1 squared times 0.3 plus 2 squared times 0.5 plus 3 squared times 0.1. And then, give myself some more room here, then I'll subtract off the mean squared, which was 1.6 squared. And keep in mind, this all is under the square root. So if I didn't want to find the standard deviation, but instead wanted to find the variance, I of course wouldn't have the square root there. Standard deviation is the square root of the variance. So continuing this on, what I end up with, throwing this into the calculator, is the square root of 3.2 minus the mean squared, which is 2.56. That comes to the square root of 0.64, which is simply 0.8. Alright, so I've got my mean and my standard deviation. Now I can calculate the minimum and maximum usual values for this distribution. So the maximum usual value, let me just call it the max, is my mean plus 2 times my standard deviation. That is mean plus 2 times, 1.6 plus 2 times 0.8, which comes to 3.2. Now my minimum usual value, same idea, except now I'm going to subtract 2 standard deviations. So that is 1.6 minus 2 times 0.8. And this comes out to be 0. So don't let that fool you. We're saying the minimum usual value is 0 and the maximum usual value is 3. So if you go back up and look at our distribution, it turns out that all the values that our random variable could take on would be what we call usual values. In other words, there are not going to be any unusual values coming from this data.